Coaching the bridge. The bridge is a movement pattern that's known for building strong, solid, round, firm glutes. When I'm working with clients, typically the first bridging variation I will show them is a hip thrust. I'm fortunate enough to have a hip thruster, but if you do not have a hip thruster, then you can just use an exercise bench. That'll do just fine. When you're setting up for your bridge, first and foremost, where do I place my back? I want to place my back on the bench or on the hip thruster pad, somewhere around where my shoulder blades sit. When I'm working with a female client, I'll tell her wherever your bra strap lies or your sports bra strap, whichever it is that you're wearing, that's what you place on the bench. From there, I want to dig my feet in, but I don't want to come too close where the stretch of my quads take over. So I'll show you an example. If I bring my feet in too close, the stretch of my quads are going to take over and I'm not going to be able to get my glutes high enough in the bridge. So I want to find a nice happy medium where I'm not too far out, but I'm not too close in. Typical rule of thumb is wherever your shins are vertical into the floor, so they point nice and straight, and then from there, you drive up for your bridge by squeezing the glutes. So I got my shins vertical, good foot placement, good placement on the bench, and then I'm coming back down. As you're coming to the top of the bridge, what you want to do is two things. The first thing, I'm keeping my head facing forward, and the second thing, I'm going to squeeze my stomach nice and strong and contract my abdominals. So I'm driving up, squeezing at the glutes, head faces forward, stomach is nice and strong. The reason I keep my head forward is so that I can get my stomach nice and flat, and I squeeze and tense at the stomach so that I make sure my spine is nice and neutral, my glutes are doing all the work, and I'm not arching through my back. So I'll show you 3 reps in real time. 1, dipping down, 2, dipping down, and 3, making sure to squeeze my glutes as hard as I can every time. It is okay with this exercise to have a little arch in your upper back. So notice as I'm coming down, I'm not having my back be perfectly straight. I have a little bit of arch through where I'm placing my shoulder blades on the bench and dipping, and I'm coming up for the squeeze. That should be totally fine when working your bodyweight hip thrust. So setting up for Megan in her bodyweight hip thrust, we've got her feet in the perfect position. The other thing you want to do with your feet is same as your squat. You want to have them shoulder width apart. You can point the toes out a little bit if you feel it's necessary. Whenever I'm working with a client, any glute exercise they're doing, I say, when do you feel it the most? So I get people to play around with their foot positioning, foot angles, whatever they feel the most in their glutes, that's always the position I get them to go with. So for now, we're going to start feet shoulder width apart, and then her toes facing pretty much forward. From there, she's going to put her hands on her hips. So you have a little bony prominence that comes out of your hips. It's called your ASIS. I want her to grab that because from there, she's going to feel her glutes working and squeezing to get to that neutral pelvis and ultimately neutral spine. So from here, she's going to come up, go for it. Start by squeezing your glutes. Good squeeze at the top. Notice her head is facing forward. Her stomach is nice and flat. Glutes are on. Shins are vertical. Go back down. Good. And a little arch in the upper back, and you can drive up. Big squeeze. Good. And come back down. The only thing I notice here with Megan's hip thrust is that if she were to use a barbell, she might want to place her shoulders onto the bench a little bit more to have more leverage. But with a bodyweight hip thrust, that should be just fine. Another thing I'll warn you is that if you're using a bench, sometimes the bench can tilt up and down when you're doing your hip thrust. It shouldn't tilt up and down, but if you're new to it, that's what might happen. Just be a little more fluid in your hip thrust. Worst case scenario, ask someone to stand on the bench or place a dumbbell on the bench.